you might say, 7'2" shacks that big or whatever. But there are so many of these accounts with massive bone structure, with jaw bones that fit over the face, of a much higher percentage than today's population. If you read through all the ancient documents. So, I mean, I'm sorry.
So there was a lot more shacks walking around.
There's a lot more.
The first time I learned about you was from a gentleman by the name of Praveen Mohan.
Oh yeah,
he was in here, and he was pointing out some of the newspaper articles from like the New York Times from, I want to say it was like the 40s and 50s, maybe, and they were showing actual excavations of these giant skeletons that were found in these mounds in like South America, and some were even in, I think one was in Texas maybe. And he was pointing out that like you were the like foremost guy around here that's researching this kind of stuff.
Yeah, first of all, I like him. He's a really solid dude, and he's into the traditions, like in India. Same thing. I've read all the Vedas,
right?
The Ashtavakra Gita, Ribhu Gita, all the metaphysical and historical texts of the Hindus, and it's wild.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I found is like in 1939 at the Moorhis Mound in Texas, they found a massive skull. And there's a picture of it. And William Duffin was the archaeologist. It was like a WPA works project in 39. And I went to talk to him, and he passed away at like 106 a couple of years ago. Yeah, right? But anyways, the skull rests at the Texas Archaeological Research Lab, and it's enormous. And then in 1933, George Fisher, head geologist of Pennsylvania, unearths a 7'5" skeleton. Donald Cadzo joins him on the dig. He is Oxford-trained archaeologist. He writes this article about finding a 7'5" skeleton, and then about 3 months later, he's cruising in a van with the 7'5" skeleton, talking about it, going to Harrisburg because the Smithsonian requested that it goes there, right? So that's where I go with this. It's not just like this drunk farmer from 1720. It is like respected professionals, including in the 50s and 60s, Don Dragoo, head of the anthropology department at the Carnegie at the Cresat Mound in West Virginia. They were destroying it for an oil and gas project. So he excavated and he found a 7'2" skeleton with massive bone structure, huge jaw. They call it the Adena jaw. And Webb and Snow at the Dover Mound in Kentucky, funded by the University of Kentucky, unearthed another 7' skeleton with massive bone structure. The Adena people elongated their skulls. There's all this mystery here, right? So you might say, 7'2" shacks that big or whatever. But there are so many of these accounts with massive bone structure, with jaw bones that fit over the face, of a much higher percentage than today's population. If you read through all the ancient documents. So, I mean, I'm sorry.
So there was a lot more shacks walking around.
There's a lot more shacks, but they were like NFL linebackers. They weren't like skinny dudes either. And every explorer you can name encountered giant native chiefs. Tuscaloosa in Alabama, DeSoto, you know, him and his father. And the archaeological narrative is, you know, the Indians were like 5'7", 5'8", and the Spanish, the English, they were 5'2", 5'3", which is true. The general population was, but their leaders, the tall ones, the chiefs, they were on their knees. They towered over all our tallest men. You know, you read the accounts and these explorers who were trained in the art of observation, and they are talking about absolutely enormous tribal chiefs, all the way down to Patagonia. Magellan, Drake, DeSoto, they all encountered and recorded this happening. So it's just another, you know, just like polydactylism, extra fingers and extra toes. It's another aspect of the mystery that's ubiquitous. It's found around the world by cultures who had little or no contact. And that's what catches my attention.
What's the biggest skeleton excavation that you've seen, a human skeleton that you've actually like looked at? And
Good question. Well, 7'6" at the Mudder Museum in Philadelphia.
And where did that one come from?
Kentucky. It came from Kentucky, but part of getting it is that they sent it to the Mudder Museum with the understanding that they couldn't say where it came from. So I know it's very strange, but there's a 7'6" skeleton that's believed possibly to be one of these mound builder giants. But I will say we have that photograph of like an 8.5 foot skeleton that was found and shipped to the Smithsonian in 1933 that we found during our show in the microfilm, and we got it in our book. So it's this picture of Les Eaton, who's over 6 foot tall, next to an 8.5 foot tall skeleton. So to the argument I made, the Smithsonian is claiming that the largest skeleton they ever received was 6'3". So that, and I'm not saying, modern day scientists, they probably don't even know these stories. Mm-hmm. But at the time, there was a particularly zealous, racist, pre-Nazi eugenist named Dr. Hrdlicka that ran the anthropology department with an iron fist. And
wow.
Oh yeah.
What's his name? How do you spell his name?
Hrdlicka.
Hrdlicka?
Hrdlick, Dr. Hrdlicka.
So you can find some about this dude. He sounds wild.
He was a Czech anthropologist. He was, a lot of the early scientists, there he is right there, actually were into this idea of giants. They were open to it. Their scientists wrote about, a 36-inch circumference skull found by Thomas M. Perrin in Illinois, like massive bones in their ethnology reports. Mm-hmm. But he was the guy in 1933 who wrote and talked about giants and no more. This is wishful thinking. This is delusions of amateurs and things like that, ignoring the fact that his own scientists had uncovered and reported these things. So it's a really interesting dynamic. And I'm going to say something that's repulsive, but he also said and believed some of the most racist things you can imagine. He wrote and edited the Journal of American Anthropology in 1933. We write about it in our book. He said, the greatest threat to the American population is blending the inferior blood of the 1/10 of the Negro population into the superior white blood of the rest of of the white race. And he had all kinds of like that. And that's what scientists believed back then. And this is, you have Native American civilizations with these giant chiefs, the tall ones, with these legends of cannibalistic, warlike giants that are clearly in their traditions. You have magnificent geometric forms that predict eclipses. You have this vast and incredible Native American civilization, but they were denigrated and they were marginalized as a ploy to steal their land. And the scientists of the time went along with that too. It's like, we're not going to embrace any of this mythological, childlike ideas of the Native Americans. We're going to marginalize them, and that's what happened. So scientists today do not operate like that. But you got to be honest about the shit that happened when in this crucible when modern theories were formed. And one of the missteps of science is that they pushed away oral traditions and native indigenous wisdom. So we don't listen to the Inca when they tell us something that lines up with a mythological idea. We don't listen to the natives that have been there for tens of thousands of years when they tell us that giants were a historical reality. That doesn't mean they were, but to dismiss them out of hand and portray indigenous people as superstitious and childlike, you can feel that too. When you're told about a native tradition, you get this vibe of like, I have respect for their culture, but I don't believe this shit. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's kind of like what we're taught by science. So sorry, that's a long-winded way of saying be open to indigenous traditional narratives.